He had pulled bodies out of burning houses before. He had seen things no man should have to see. But nothing prepared Captain Mike Delaney for the moment he crawled through smoke and fire, certain he was about to find a little girl's body, and instead found her sitting untouched in the middle of a room that should have killed her. 20 years on the job, and Mike still can't explain it. He just calls it what it was. A miracle. Mike Delaney had been a firefighter for 2 decades. Broad shoulders, salt and pepper hair, the kind of steady hands that come from years of running toward danger while everyone else runs away. He worked out of Station 14 in a mid-sized town in East Tennessee, and if you asked anyone who knew him, they'd tell you Mike was solid. Dependable. The guy you wanted showing up on your worst day. But underneath that steady exterior, Mike had been quietly wrestling with God for years. He grew up in church. His mother used to drag him and his brothers to Sunday service every week, whether they wanted to go or not. But somewhere between his first house fire at 23 and the hundreds that followed, Mike had stopped really believing any of it made a difference. He'd seen too much. Pulled too many people, young and old, out of homes that fire had already claimed. He still called himself a Christian if anyone asked, still believed in God in some general sense, but the kind of close, personal faith his mother used to talk about, the kind where you actually expected God to show up and do something, that had faded somewhere along the way. "I've seen fire take everything," Mike would say sometimes, half joking, half not. Makes it hard to believe in miracles when you're the one carrying bodies out. He never said that in front of his mother. She would have had something to say about it. Then came the night of the Ashcroft Lane fire. It was a little after 11 at night when the call came in. A 2-story house, fully engulfed, and dispatch reported that a family was still inside, including a 6-year-old girl named Emma Ray who hadn't made it out with the rest of her family. Mike's crew arrived to a scene that made even the most experienced firefighters go quiet for a second. Flames were pouring out of the upstairs windows. Smoke rolled thick and black into the night sky. Emma's parents stood in the front yard, held back by neighbors, screaming her name, the mother collapsing to her knees, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "She's still in there. Please, my baby's still in there. Her room, 2nd floor, please, somebody get my baby." Mike didn't hesitate. He and his partner, a younger firefighter named Jason Cole, geared up and went straight for the front door while the rest of the crew worked the hoses. Inside, the heat was intense enough to feel through their gear, the air thick with smoke so heavy their flashlights barely cut through it. They found the staircase, already weakened by the flames curling up the walls, and started climbing, knowing every second mattered, knowing the structure could give way at any moment. Mike would say later that as he climbed those stairs, something in him, something he hadn't done in a long time, just came out. "God, please. Please let this little girl still be alive. Please, if you're there, protect her right now." It wasn't a polished prayer. It wasn't the kind of prayer his mother used to say with her hands folded neatly in her lap. It was raw, desperate, shouted in his mind between breaths of smoke and heat, the prayer of a man who had spent years quietly doubting whether prayers like this actually reached anywhere. They reached the 2nd floor. The hallway was a wall of black smoke, flames licking along the ceiling, chunks of drywall already falling. Mike's training told him the room to the left was Emma's, based on what the mother had screamed at them outside. He kicked the door open, bracing himself for the worst, certain that in this kind of heat, in this kind of fire, there was little chance anyone could have survived. And there she was. Emma Ray, 6 years old, sitting on the floor in the corner of her room, hugging a stuffed rabbit, completely calm. Untouched. The walls around her were scorched black. The ceiling directly above her had partially collapsed, chunks of burning debris scattered just feet from where she sat. The heat in that room was intense enough that Mike's own gear registered dangerous temperatures. But somehow, in the middle of all of it, in a small circle around that little girl, nothing had touched her. Not her clothes. Not her skin. Not even the stuffed rabbit in her arms. Mike said later that for one full second, he just stood in that doorway, frozen, because it didn't make sense. Every part of his training, every fire he had ever fought, told him this shouldn't be possible. Emma. Sweetheart, I'm here to get you out, okay? I've got you. He scooped her up, and she wrapped her small arms around his neck without hesitation, without even crying, and said the words that Mike says he will remember for the rest of his life. The man in the bright clothes told me to stay right there and not move. He said someone was coming. Mike carried her out of that house through smoke and flame, down a staircase that partially collapsed less than 2 minutes after they cleared it, and out into the front yard where her mother collapsed onto the grass, pulling her daughter into her arms, sobbing the kind of sobs that come from a grief that suddenly turned into overwhelming joy. Emma Ray didn't have a single burn. Paramedics checked her over completely, confused by how a child could come out of a room that hot completely unscathed. Her only complaint, according to the report, was that she was a little too warm and wanted some water. Mike didn't tell anyone what Emma had said to him that night, not for a while. He sat in the cab of the fire truck afterward, still in his gear, hands trembling slightly, not from the heat, but from something he couldn't quite explain. His captain at the time noticed and asked if he was all right. Yeah, Mike said quietly. Yeah, I need a minute. He thought about the man in bright clothes. He thought about a 6-year-old girl calm in the middle of a fire that should have killed her instantly. He thought about the desperate prayer he had shouted in his mind climbing those stairs, the first real prayer he had prayed in longer than he wanted to admit. That night, after his shift ended, Mike drove to his mother's house at 2 a.m. She opened the door in her robe, confused and half asleep, and found her grown son, a 20-year firefighter who had seen more tragedy than most people see in a lifetime, standing on her porch with tears in his eyes. Mama, he said, his voice breaking. I think I saw something tonight I can't explain. I think I saw God do something real. He told her everything. The fire. The stairs. The prayer. The room that should have burned a child alive and somehow didn't. And Emma's words about the man in bright clothes who told her not to move. His mother, who had been praying for her son's faith to come back to life for over a decade, simply held his hand and said, Baby, I've been asking God to get your attention for 15 years. I just didn't know he'd use a fire to do it. Mike Delaney is still a firefighter today. He still runs into burning buildings when the call comes in. But something shifted in him after that night on Ashcroft Lane, something his crew noticed even before he said a word about it. He started praying before every call, not out of habit, but because he actually believed someone was listening. He started going back to church, not because his mother made him, but because he wanted to be there. He's shared Emma's story more times than he can count now, at his church, at firefighter conferences, even once on a local news segment about the fire. He always tells it the same simple way, without trying to explain the parts that can't be explained. I don't know who the man in bright clothes was that Emma saw. Maybe it was an angel. Maybe it was something I'll never fully understand this side of heaven. But I know what I saw when I opened that door. A room that should have killed a little girl in seconds, and a child sitting calm in the middle of it, completely untouched. 20 years of this job, and I've never seen anything like it before or since. Emma Ray is a teenager now. Every year around the anniversary of the fire, her family sends Mike a card, thanking him for running into that house. But Mike always writes back the same thing. I just carried her out. Somebody else was already in that room protecting her long before I got there. If you're walking through a fire of your own tonight, whatever that fire looks like, a diagnosis, a broken relationship, a fear you can't shake, a doubt you've been carrying quietly for years, know this. The same God who stood in a burning room with a 6-year-old girl is standing in the middle of your storm too. You might not see him. You might not feel him. But he is there, closer than the smoke, stronger than the flames, and he has not left you alone in the fire. Mike Delaney spent years doubting whether God was really listening. It took one prayer on a burning staircase to remind him he never had to doubt at all. Whatever your fire is, don't stop praying. Someone in bright clothes might already be standing right beside you.